Welcome to my workshop. My name is Alan. I am the grandpa behind Grandpa Woodworking. This is the first in what I hope will be a series of videos showcasing some of my work. I do puzzles, I do signs, I do some artistic work, as well as some woodworking and some storytelling, and I hope to put a lot of that on my channel here for you. Today we'll be working on a puzzle, just to show you the steps that go into creating it. This is a cat puzzle. It is made out of a 1x6 piece of premium pine. When finished, it is approximately 3 by 5¼ inches. And of course it is 3/4 inch thick. Before I got on camera, I did copy the pattern onto my scanner and then printed it out onto a piece of adhesive paper. I've also cut down a piece of board that is approximately the size of what is needed for this pattern. This right here. Before putting the pattern on, I do sand it down very carefully with a DeWalt orbital sander using a combination of 80, 120 and 220 sandpaper so that I get as smooth a finish as possible on it. I have found it's much easier to sand it before cutting the pieces than afterwards. Again, as I said, this is my first video in this series, so if future videos you see a different intro, a different setup slightly, or any of those things, rest assured it's going to be the same person, just a little bit improved thing. And now taking a pin, I pry up one edge of this to get a piece to grip on. There's many ways to attach a pattern. How you do it is really up to you. This is what works for me. I will put this on here with the grain. And now we'll move over to the scroll saw and actually get to the cutting part of this process. Before I got on camera, I did put a new blade in here. I've checked my tension and I've ensured that it's square. It's very important that the saw be square to the wood, otherwise the pieces don't fit together very well. You will notice there's a little more light on there than it was earlier. That's because I have an external light that I use so that I get as much light as possible on the project. I also use a pair of headsets with the goggle on it, which allows me to see it a little bit better. And before I go any further, I will go ahead and cut the mouth so that I can just cut around it when I get ready to. This also gives me a nice place to start my cut. My goal is normally not to let it be seen where my cut starts or ends, so that I have just a nice smooth finish. Backing out now, I can turn my blade around, or turn my piece around. And if I did this right, I should be able to back into it. That also lets me know that I have a nice straight cut going. We're now coming up to the ears. It's got a pointed ear. I could just turn around and go back into the point, but my preference is to make a small circle and then cut back into it at an angle. It gives me a sharper point. It just looks a little bit cleaner on the finished product. And now we go to the other ear. Again, I could have cut that corner, but my preference is always to go past it, so I get a nice smooth transition, and then go back into the center piece. This saves me in the sanding process. I now have the first piece of the puzzle cut out. I'll set it aside right now. And go back into where I've already started my cut. At this point I do have 2 pieces cut out, and I always like to check about this time a couple of things. One is to ensure my blade tension is still good, it hasn't slipped any, and it is still good on this. If the blade slips, it gets offline, and that causes a bad spot. It just gets crooked. I also like to check at this time my fit to make sure that my pieces are going together smoothly and that I haven't been inadvertently pushing. I do check to make sure they go in either way, because the finish I use is not always possible to tell what is what as far as the which side is which. If you paint it, that makes a little bit difference, but otherwise the this just helps to ensure a nice cleaner fit, and that's what I want in my puzzles, is a very clean fit. I can set those aside and continue with my cutting. Nothing unusual was done during this past part. The only thing I did was really change the camera angle. Like I said, this is my first video that I've done on the workshop here, and I wanted to see if I can get the best angle possible for you to actually see what's going on. I did finish cutting that piece, which means it should slide right out. And of course, since it's being filmed, it's not going to do that for me. With all the pieces cut, I can now do a test fit to make sure that it is going to work right. Get this blade out of the way, or at least part of it. My goal is to get a snug fit, but not a real tight fit. And again, I am going from both sides just to ensure that it has a nice smooth carry through there. With the pieces test fit, I then carefully, most of the time, will peel off the paper. And again, depending on how well it adhered to the wood, how many small pieces I had, sometimes paper will come off in one piece. The wood is still smooth and ready to finish. And we're back. As you can see, I've gotten the paper off all these, and I've sanded off any rough edges that may have been there. So now my next step is finishing. Some people will use paint on them. I've used paint on some and do it on the top only. I prefer to use oiled linseed oil. Oiled linseed oil gives a nice coating to it. It protects the wood, and it's non-toxic once it cures. It cures for about 24 to 48 hours before I put them on a shelf or take them to a craft show. The other nice thing about boiled linseed oil is that it doesn't add any thickness to the wood. Since my puzzles are so tightly designed, I don't have much room in there for extra space. Any extra space or paint on there would make them stick or not go together well. Let me get my gloves on. I prefer wearing gloves when I use this. My process is that I have it in a bucket here, and I will, if room permits, put all the pieces in a bucket and then press them down, let them soak for a few seconds. If I'm in a production mode getting ready for a show, I will normally do several puzzles at a time and put them up to dry. In my initial layout stages, I will have a whole board laid out and then cut it up into smaller workable pieces before I actually start cutting the individual puzzles. Again, I'm doing just this one at a time for demonstration purposes. You can put boiled linseed oil on a rag or a paintbrush. Because of the small nooks and crannies in some of my stuff, that's always been easier to soak it if I can. If I have a larger piece, I will put it into a thin pan and then soak it that way. You do use a considerable amount of linseed oil at that point, but it's not real expensive and it's worth the effort. Once it's been soaked a little bit, I will take it out and dry it off slightly before putting it on the drying paper. This is just so there's no big drips on there. One thing I do want to note that if you're using paper or anything like that with boiled linseed oil, you want to make sure you put it into a wet metal can with water in it, because the way the chemical process actually dries this, it does produce some heat. I've never had a piece of paper catch on fire. I really hope I don't, but they say it could happen, so I'm very careful with that and will usually stick my paper outside and under something to dry before I put it in the trash can. Make sure all that's done. And as you can see here, I have the pieces of the puzzle lined up. They will sit on the drying shelf for anywhere from 1 to 2 days before I finally bring them back out and again reassemble the puzzle, make sure it fits right, and get it ready for either shipping or taking to a craft show, whichever it is. That is how the cat puzzle is made. The finished product, let's try this again, there. This is your finished product, and you've seen it basically from cut through finish. Again, my name is Alan. I am the voice and the grandfather behind Grandpa Woodworking. Please see my Facebook page. The link is below. And take a look at my other stuff that I've done. And I do ask you that please subscribe so you can see future videos I put up. At this time, I can't even predict a production schedule. It really depends on many things. But I would like to, if people are watching, put up some more videos. Please feel free to comment. I will try to respond to your comments as much as possible. Any suggestions you have are welcome. And again, this is my first video, so the lighting may not be perfect, angles may not be perfect, but my work is. Thank you for watching and have a wonderful day.